Welcome to How to Share, a podcast that takes a deep dive into collaboration. I'm Wynne Leon, and in this episode, I'm with IT Director John Hernandez. John and I have worked on a couple of projects together, so I can personally attest to his incredibly collaborative leadership style. John knows how to balance giving people on his team leadership, agency, and backup when needed. In short, he's a very good coach for a strong team. John tells us how he landed on this leadership style and how it's worked as his team and responsibilities have grown. We talk about how people in technology can sometimes be protective of their knowledge and not want to share. And we discuss how AI changes the game for so many people in technology and how to wrangle it as an asset, not a competitor. I asked John about how he adapts his message for people who are less technical. He reminds us about the power of telling a story and finding key beats, regardless of the topic. This is a great episode about how leadership, openness, and curiosity translate to an infectious passion for sharing and for team building. I know you'll love it. Hi, John.
Hey, Wynn.
So good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a minute.
It has. But you and I have worked on a couple IT projects over the years.
Yes, we
And
have.
I found them so fun because of your approach. We've talked about the analogy of sharing as something like the plot of a sports movie.
Sure.
The kid coach gets hired to make the team win.
Right.
And along the way, they realize that to win, they must work together. And to work
Yeah.
together, they need to share.
Yeah.
Tell us how that coach analogy applies to your work as an IT director.
Well, it's kind of a big, a big motivating factor for me, only because, as being someone who's spent the better part of 25 years being the sole IT person at some organizations, I've had to essentially, create environments where I could take a vacation or be away for a few days,
Right.
and when I finally got the ability to actually build teams for myself, for my organization that I was working
Mhm.
for, and have, help, so to speak,
Right.
in the department, it was pretty obvious to me. It's like, okay, well, they need to know what I know, or at the very least, they need to know what I do, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to speak to it,
Right.
so from the very beginning of becoming like an IT manager or or systems administrator even, I just developed the habit of just sharing everything that I could,
Right.
and my expectation was never for them to know what I know or
Yeah.
to be able to do what I do, but at the very least be aware of it, right?
Right.
And so that was kind of like the start of it, of course it has evolved,
Yeah.
throughout the years. Now that I'm managing a larger team,
Yeah.
you know, uh, when I came on board with Leisure Care, everything was kind of siloed off. You had these individual roles, within
Mhm.
the IT department, and they just had their own kind of assigned things that they did, and they didn't branch out into any of the other roles. So you had
Right.
like your systems admin who just worked on the servers and just worked on the
Mhm.
the portals, the web portals, and then you had your help desk technicians who just answered tickets, right? And they escalated about 80% of whatever they got, because they didn't know
Right.
how to do anything, or they didn't have access to certain tools. And of course, as soon as I came on board, I was like, nope, this is all going away. Everybody
Yeah.
gets access to everything. Everybody's going to have to be able to do, you know, server troubleshooting, from
Mhm.
server troubleshooting to desktop troubleshooting to, email help to, all of it, right?
Right.
And so over the span of the last 5 years, that's essentially what we've done. And now we've got a team of people that, that they kind of not so much siloed themselves off, but they've gravitated towards specific
Mhm.
technologies that they've really enjoyed working with. So
Right.
I have a SharePoint SME, I have, an Exchange SME,
Right.
I have, and they've kind of all grown into these individual roles, and also from like an expansive,
Mhm.
progression. Like my thought process is these people that are working underneath me, eventually they're going to move on. They're going to
Mhm.
try to, get that, systems administrator level position or a network admin position or even an IT manager or information systems management role, and so allowing them to play in this giant
Yeah.
playground that we have, which is IT. I help them kind of develop these skills and develop passions for the work, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm very passionate about the stuff that I do. I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about the tools that I like to use, so, I've said to a lot of people, I'll sit down for 2 hours and talk to you about SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive, so,
Yes.
which we've done, right?
We've done that.
So,
I'm with you all the way. But I love there's three things that you said there
hmm,
that are so key.
hmm,
First is sharing enables you to get help, especially if
exactly,
you are a one person
exactly,
team. You're like, okay, I'm
exactly.
gonna have to tell people what I do. I mean, that's
Yep.
it's so basic, but it's so
Right.
true, right?
Right. Yeah.
The second thing is that mentorship,
Hmm.
mentoring people to
Right.
that next level. And enabling them to both specialize
Right.
and still be a part of the team,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny because like those two elements came very, very organically once I developed the ideology of like, nope, we're just gonna share everything,
Yep.
right? We're not going to, keep people in the dark, and
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I've actually noticed has come to develop quite a bit of respect and admiration within my team is that, they know I'm an open book, that if they have a
Yeah.
question about something and if I can answer it, I'm going to give them the answer, right? There
Yeah.
are, of course, caveats to that, right?
Yeah.
Being the director of a
Right.
department within an organization. And so, I have to temper that. But on the same token, they know that if I can tell
Yeah.
them, I will, right?
Yeah.
They need to actually take the steps. If they want to know, they
Hmm.
know that they can just come talk to me. And
Yeah.
in some cases, like it doesn't happen. I have some members of my team that they just want to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Which is great, you know.
Right.
But in other cases, there are other members who really come to appreciate the fact that they can come to me for
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah.
And that I will share with them. And I've even done some training sessions, right, where I've brought people, within my department, on board and got them exposed to, things. One of the things we're working on right now is a huge data migration from our data centers,
Hmm.
and I've got two members of my team, that are just kind of spearheading that for me, only because I said, hey, we're going to do this. You want in? And they're like, oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that leads to the third point, which is the passion. I mean, it just
Right,
people get excited.
right.
They,
Exactly.
it that flow of energy, it just really builds when you
Exactly.
have that openness, right?
Yeah. It's funny. One time recently, in I'd say in the last 6 months, I had an employee during an annual review process, tell me that she felt stagnant in her
Mhm.
position, which is I think probably one of the worst things you can say to a guy like me, because I'm like, oh, careful what you wish for, because I've got stuff that I could give you to do,
Right? Right.
and it's funny because that one conversation, like all these months later, I remember having a conversation with her not too long ago, and she was just like, she was like, you're gonna have to fire me. I'm never leaving you. She was like, the fact that you took that one statement
Yeah.
and gave me all of this awesome work to do,
Right.
and she's become kind of like our SharePoint,
Yeah.
SME. I mean, she'll be the first to say, I don't know as much as you do. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. You've done some pretty cool stuff,
Yeah.
but she's just said like, it's just so awesome that you gave me this
Right.
opportunity, and all I had to do was ask for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, come on, you
Right.
know.
Well, there's another analogy that fits here that I think works for you, which is sort of as a band because you play in a band,
Yeah.
and it seems like what you're doing also within your team is getting them all
Right.
um
Collaborating, right?
right,
Cooperating together, right? And yeah, and a
collaborating,
band is a
yeah,
hundred
make
percent collaboration.
right, making
Yeah,
music.
exactly.
You have a rhythm, you have a beat that you have to meet, but everybody
Exactly.
gets to play their own instrument.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
There's an ebb and a flow,
Hmm.
it doesn't work all the time, but that's where I come in, because
Yeah.
like I can kind of like look at situations, and if
Yeah.
somebody is kind of floundering, I can step in and go, hey, is this too much for you? Is this,
Right.
do you need help? Should I bring
Yeah.
somebody else in? Should I hand it to somebody else? And the goal is to kind of take ego out of the picture, right?
Hmm.
It's not I'm not going to look bad at you, look down at you if
Right.
you've bitten off more than you can chew. Because trust me, I've been in this industry almost 30 years. I have totally bitten off more than I can chew, way more times than I can count, you
Oh,
know,
I could listen to that too,
you
right?
know,
But
so
what's interesting about being in the technology industry is that
mm,
oftentimes technology people hoard their knowledge because
yeah,
they think this is what's going to set me apart. Or
right.
sometimes, and I'll could totally cop to this one too. Like if I say too much, I'm going to reveal how much I don't know, and because technology changes so fast, right? I
Right,
mean,
right.
so it's that openness that you're talking about really helps to change both of those.
It does. And to be honest, like I've had members of my team who have since moved on that did kind of share that ideology. You know, it was like almost ingrained in them that they had to make things complicated so that only they could do it, right?
Right.
Only they could work on it, right?
Hmm.
Or they kind of rifled through topics in an effort to kind of get people to, get people's eyes to roll into the back of their head and not
Right.
understand what they're talking about, right?
Yep.
Whereas for me, I pride myself in being able to explain very highly complicated things to a casual, to a layman,
Hmm.
someone who's not in the IT industry,
Right.
I'll break it down into analogy for you if you need me to, so that you can understand what it is that I'm talking about, especially when it comes to elements like cybersecurity,
Hmm.
like I need the CEO of a company to know what could happen
Right.
if we don't buy this particular product or we don't deploy this particular solution, and what those ramifications could be. And it's money,
Hmm.
and it's time, it's resources that are on the table.
Yeah.
We don't do that. But from back to an employee perspective, I have had individuals that have kind of railed against that ideology of like,
Hmm.
we're a team. We all need to
Hmm.
work together and we all should be able to support each other, right? Less so myself, and I'll be the first one to admit, like, I'm not so much expecting other members of my team to be able to do all of the administrative tasks that I
Hmm.
do. And oddly enough, since I've been kind of, espousing this culture within my department, the members of my team now have actually stepped up and said, "Hey, you need to take time off. What do we need to learn how to do so that you can take time off?"
That's good.
And I'm like, "Okay, all right,
Yeah.
cool. I get
Fair
it.
enough. You're right.
Drink my
Right.
own Kool-Aid. Here we
Which
go.
full circle brings us
So yeah,
back to your
exactly.
first point, which is that you needed to tell other people what you did so that you could
Exactly.
get help.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's interesting you say that because I do believe that there is that whole fear of job security, right, within
Right.
within our industry,
Yeah.
in IT, and I've seen it firsthand,
And
100%.
AI is going to change that, though. I mean, back
Yes.
in the day when we learned and we were sysadmins, we'd go buy a book,
Yep.
right? But now, a lot of the know-how, a lot of the problem solving, I mean, not just AI, but just the internet. You can
Yep.
search up a problem to an error message, a
Oh
problem
yeah.
code,
And
all
we
that
Google
stuff.
things all the
Yeah,
time.
right.
My Google foo is strong.
And then that makes what we bring to it is that ability to synthesize knowledge, that
Yep.
ability to forecast what's going to happen. It's all those things that
Right.
come from sharing, right?
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
um that openness, that sharing of knowledge helps us do that
Yeah.
human work much better.
Exactly. Exactly. We leverage AI currently,
Yeah.
in a couple of different avenues. We are currently toying around with Copilot because
Hmm.
we're a Microsoft shop.
Yeah.
And I use it to build documentation, to build policies and
Yeah.
procedures. We have AI baked into our remote management suite, for like,
Hmm.
troubleshooting tickets, and that kind of
Right.
stuff. That I don't know if it gets leveraged a whole lot, but it's there.
Yeah. Right.
I know that there's a couple of members of my team that use it to build PowerShell scripts to automate things,
Hmm.
like it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's a part of our toolbox,
Right.
100%.
Well, and for big data crunching,
Yeah.
like cybersecurity and the security aspect of it really can make a difference because
We actually just pulled the trigger on a penetration testing tool that
yeah,
leverages AI.
yeah,
So yeah,
right,
it's
because
a
it
thing.
can do those automated tasks. But that frees us
Exactly.
up to the thing that to the sort of circling back to what you're saying, which is the way that you lead your team allows for that openness and
Exactly.
growth. We don't have
Exactly.
to hang on to the things
Right.
that we know to
Right.
differentiate us because
It's yeah, it's very much a paradigm shift for sure. And
Mhm.
it's continuing to happen, right? I
Right.
think the next 5 to 10 years is going to really kind of, reveal what our
Yep.
role in the industry is going to look like,
Right.
once AI has really kind of taken over a lot of these elements.
Yeah.
And my hope is that it just frees us up to be able to be more collaborative and more
Yeah.
engaging with each other and because I mean the human element is never going to go away, right? Like
Right.
there isn't an AI right now that can do what I do, or
Right.
even another member of my team, right? Will there ever be one? I don't know, maybe, but how good would it be in a face-to-face interaction with
Right.
like, retiree, something like one of our
Yeah.
residents, or
Right.
another human being, right?
Yeah.
And those are all questions that I think, that's a few years down the
Yeah.
road,
Yeah.
right?
That's true.
Yeah.
But I think it gets to another point. You and I joke about how we can geek out about this technology,
Yeah.
and we have. But
Yes.
when you're talking to someone who isn't a technology person,
Right.
and we have to explain that, as you're saying, whether it's talking to a CEO about the complexity of the security, or
Hmm.
talking to a resident or caregiver about how to take advantage of it. There's a selection of audience that you do to change your message and what you share.
Sure. Yeah.
Because otherwise we can flood people with too much information.
Yeah. And it's funny because one of the things that you have to develop early on, especially if you're going to be in this industry, right, is the ability to detect when you've lost them, right? Right.
Yeah, right.
When you're starting to say things,
Hmm.
'cause like, I mean, I can speak in three-letter acronyms all day long, right? But
Yep.
who's gonna understand that? You will understand that. Others not so much, right?
Yeah.
And so, and there are varying degrees, right? To the extent of telling a story that actually explains, what is really going on, and
Hmm.
what they, gives them the key beats of what they need to
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
you know, using one acronym and then explaining what that acronym is and how
Hmm.
that impacts the topic
Hmm.
of conversation, right? So that they're at least kind of brought up to speed, so that they're
Right.
maybe learning something while
Hmm.
you're kind of discussing this particular topic with them, all the way to just, spending, an hour getting them 100% up to speed with everything
Right.
that's going on, with all of the individual, elements, right? And
Yeah.
like showing them, via like a PowerPoint presentation, or like a whiteboard. I
Hmm.
used to whiteboard all the time when I was working for like digital streaming and aggregating
Right.
companies, when I was explaining RESTful APIs to the CEO, right? And how they funneled data, or funneled,
Right.
information back into our data, into our data center, that kind of stuff. So, being able to like gauge the room, right? And
Hmm.
then speak to that level,
Yeah.
is crucial. And,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's something that can really be taught. You have to be able to see it at their
Yep.
level, but also see it at yours, and kind of meet them somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle, or maybe,
Well,
at their
yeah.
level. Yeah.
There's a couple of things that you said there that are so interesting because they're sort of
Hmm.
kind of key to there, which is, you know, the key beats, and
Yeah.
telling a story. Because it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what kind of information that you're sharing,
Right.
you're figuring out what those things are
Right.
and using that, telling that story to share the passion,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Because story is how we share passion,
Yeah.
um, with
It's funny
all the
because I
different
call it,
objects.
I call it the pitch, right? Like I'm
Right.
selling something, even though I'm
Right.
not really selling it,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get them to buy into it,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I approach it, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what I want is for everybody else to be as passionate about it as I am,
Yeah.
like I want that passion to be infectious, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and, uh, and the only way that I've seen to do it is to get them excited about it.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, it's funny because we had a podcast with Peter Samuelson, who is a filmmaker. He made Revenge of the Nerds,
Oh, okay.
Return of Pink Panther,
Nice.
Arlington Way. Anyway, but he talked about pitching scripts
Hmm.
to somebody who's, as he said, highly trained in the skill of saying no.
Sure, sure.
And it was like he said, the way that you have to do it is to tell that story.
Yeah.
If you want to open somebody else's heart, and you're going to have to find that story, figure out how to pitch it, and then you can, pass on that vision.
Yeah. I
And
have, I
so
have
whether we're talking about films or technology, it's the same.
Yeah. I have a regular saying to my team, hearts and minds. That's how we win it. Hearts and minds,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any um hearts and minds that you found you can't crack open?
To date, there have been a couple, that just, and it wasn't so much that I didn't win them over as much as it is that they just were utterly overwhelmed, and there was nothing that I could do to really
Mm-hmm.
make them feel better about it. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
understood where I was coming from. They understood the need, or the reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it was just beyond them, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's not so much even a generational thing because this particular individual that I'm thinking about was my age, right? He just never was exposed to the level of technology that I engorge myself in on a daily basis, right?
Right.
You know, and so and it's funny because it was actually about something that I felt was pretty important, which is like a password management, which I know you've done a podcast on, right? And it was very fascinating for me to like watch that podcast and think about it. It's like, oh man, like I totally get some of those elements, and
Yeah.
I personally, have seen how, not having it can have an impact, right? And then this individual, I think he eventually ended up just getting better about how he generated his own passwords, like made them more complicated, more complex, and he was still writing them down in a little notepad, right? But,
Right.
it's like, okay, man, just don't share that with anybody,
All
like
right.
keep it in a safe, keep it in a locked drawer at your desk, just don't stick it on a sticky notepad and stick it to your monitor, you know.
Right.
But yeah, so there are elements like that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
now explaining high level things like, say, for instance, a penetration testing tool, um, when I go to a C-level or an executive who knows nothing about IT, I just tell them, look, this is a tool that we use to test to find out what we don't know, right? Because at the end of the day,
Right.
it's very much less important what I know,
Yeah.
and it's more important about what I don't know, right?
Right.
And how do I fill those gaps, right? And and I tell them, like,
Yeah.
look, we have all of these other tools, we have all of these other things that we've implemented that are getting us to a certain level, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know what's waiting around the corner,
Yeah.
right? And how do we prevent that, or how do we do the best we can to, to be prepared for those kinds of 0-day events, as they call them, and even just a conversation like that is enough to kind of get them engaged, right? And get them interested. And it's like, okay, so what does this tool do exactly? And then we can kind of drill down, right? And have those elements. But yeah, there have been others that have been just like, no, this is just not for me. I don't understand. If you say we need to do it, we'll pay for it, right? And I've literally had that said to me before, right? Like if I convey enough passion and enough, drive, and enough, reasoning, right? To tell them like, look, this is what we need to do. And 9 times out of 10 get the okay, and they're just like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to defer to you.
Yeah.
You're my expert. So you
Right.
tell me what it is that we
Right.
need to do, right? It's like, okay, I can do that.
And I get that about the
Yeah.
technology, but what I love and about what you've shared is sort of fundamental to sharing altogether. I mean, your passion comes through, your openness comes through, your curiosity comes through. I mean, those are the things when we share that just are multiplied.
Yep.
And
It's
I love it.
infectious. It can be
It
infectious.
is
100%.
infectious. So
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your infectious enthusiasm and for sharing
My pleasure. My
with
pleasure.
us. Thank you, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Wynne.
Thank you for listening. Our music was written for us by the incredible duo of Jack Campora and Rob Koenig. For show notes and more great inspiration, see avitiva.com, avitiva.com.